It's Chassidus Nissan, Chassidus Agula. You have to see things happening on a large scale, huge, gigantic miracles. Be such miracles that you will no longer need to say Tillim as a request, just Tillim as thanking or something. Okay. Lam Natseach, Mizmer LeDavid. Yancha Eloi b'Yemtzora, Yisagevcho Shem Elahei Yaakov. Yishlach Ezecha Mekodesh, Mitzin Yisadeka. Yizker Kodem Chesecho, Ve'iloscho Yidashna Sela. Yitem Lechocho Vavecho, V'chol Atzoscho Yemali. Ranu Rabbi Shulasecho, V'Shem Eloheinu Nidgero. Yemali Adonai Kol Meshalesecho. Ato Yodaiti, Yeshia Adonai Meshichai, Yanehu Mishmei Koche, the Gvures Yesha Yemine, Eile Barechev, Eile Basusim, Anachno B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Naskir, Hema Koru V'Nafogu, Anachno Kamnu V'Naseder, Adonai Yeshia Amelech Yaneinu V'Yem Kareinu. Okay. Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Haolam, Shahakol Niyah B'Dvarim. So we have today and tomorrow, and I see there's much more we have to cover than with the time that we have. So try to squeeze it in the best I can. So we're on page 48, where the topic is Yitzias Mitzrayim. This chapter, Tanya, which is chapter 47, which we did yesterday, it actually begins with something which immediately raises a question. Why? It says, B'chol dor v'dor, in every generation, and then the Alter Rebbe adds, B'chol yom v'yom, in every day. Chayiv adam liris atzmei, a person is obligated to regard themselves as if today they went out of Mitzrayim. The question is, in the Haggadah, it doesn't say every day, it says every generation. Which means, just like then, the experience of going out of Mitzrayim happened once, not every day. So every generation we have to picture as if this is the generation that we were in Egypt, and this generation our Hashem took us out of Egypt, because had he not taken those people out of Egypt, we would still be there. But where's the source for every day? And the answer is, Alter Rebbe is not Chas v'Sholom saying something different than what it says in the Haggadah. The Alter Rebbe is explaining that when the Haggadah says that in every generation we're supposed to picture ourselves as if we're going out of Golus, it doesn't just mean in every generation, it actually means every day. And the basis for this is because every single day we're supposed to actually remember Yitzias Mitzrayim. We say it in davening, and there's a special part that we say in Shema, which explains in this chapter of Tanya why actually we say it in the Shema. So what does it mean to go out of Mitzrayim in a spiritual sense? Physically, we know that happened once, and that happened over 3,300 years ago, but it means what was going on spiritually is something which we can experience every generation and also every day. So on the list that I gave you, which is page 48, okay, sorry, let me try this one. It says on top of the page, first of all, number 2, it says the word Mitzrayim is a name of a country, but in Hebrew, Mitzrayim has another definition. It means Mitzarim or Gvulim. So Mitzarim or Gvulim means boundaries. A boundary is something that limits a person, confines a person. I mean, this is as far as you can go. And Mitzrayim also comes from the Hebrew word Meitzar, which means narrowness, or again, for confinement. So Yitzias Mitzrayim means That's what Alter Rebbe explains in this chapter 57, that the Nefesh Elokis is in a sense in Mitzrayim. Who's confining the Nefesh Elokis? Who's limiting Nefesh Elokis? Is the Guf and the Nefesh Bahamis. The Neshama in itself wants to love Hashem, have fear of Hashem, wants to do mitzvahs, and the Guf and the Nefesh Bahamis are holding it back. So if a person is able to free themselves from the chains of the Guf and the Nefesh Bahamis and do what the Neshama really wants to do, study Torah, do mitzvahs, and come close to Hashem, experience really love and fear of Hashem, on a personal level, that's called going out of Mitzrayim. On the other hand, though, how could you say that this is something every day and for every person? There are people that are not on the level that they're doing Averis, and they have to struggle with their Nefesh Bahamis. In fact, they are at Tzaddikim, and this would mean that it doesn't really apply to everyone. But of course, what it says in the Torah applies to every single Yid, even Tzaddikim. And there's a part in the Haggadah that actually supports this by saying there was once a story where these great sages, Rabbi Akiva, and a whole list of names, one greater than the other, the greatest sages of that generation were sitting together, and an entire night they were talking about Yetzias Mitzrayim. And then their students had to come to them and say to them, dear rabbis, it's already time to say the Shema. So what do we see from this? One of the things we see from this is that no matter how great you are, the concept of Yetzias Mitzrayim applies to you. So the answer to that is, again, looking at the sheet, number 3 and number 4. Number 3 says Mitzrayim the Klipa. Number 4 says Mitzrayim the Kedusha, which means if we translate the word Mitzrayim as boundaries, limitations, confinement, it's not only going out of my limitations that before I wasn't keeping Shabbos, and now I'm keeping Shabbos. But after I passed that point already, now I'm keeping Shabbos. What would be going out of Mitzrayim now? And the answer is it's Mitzrayim in Kedusha. It's in the realm of Kedusha, it's in the realm of holiness and goodness, but still I'm limited, which means I'm observing Shabbos in a limited way. And I'm not really doing more than I could really do. So for example, if a person is studying Torah, but studying Torah in a limited amount of time, and they could really spend more time studying Torah. Or a person studies Torah very superficially, and I'm being a little bit lazy, I don't want to really work hard to go deeper into it. If I have a question and I don't understand something, rather than sort of delving into it and try to look for the answer and studying it on a deeper level, instead I say, that's too hard, I'm going to the next page. So in other words, these are limitations, but it's in Kedusha. A person gives tzedakah, but really they're capable of giving X amount of tzedakah, but they feel limited. I don't feel like giving so much to tzedakah, even though they really could. I'm not talking about violating Torah. Person could be giving tzedakah, he's giving meiser, 1/10 of his earnings, or even more than 1/10, but they could do more. But I don't want to, it's hard to go out of my limitations. So that would be going out of Mitzrayim on a personal level. So that means that even somebody who's davening and learning and serving Hashem, in fact, even someone who's on the level of a Beinoni, even someone's on the level of a tzaddik, is being that Hashem is infinite, and serving Hashem is infinite. There's no limit to how far you can go. So there's always room, if we talk about Mitzrayim and Kedusha, there's always room to move forward and to go further. In fact, each one of us probably has both. In other words, if, for example, there are certain things in Yiddishkeit that I'm struggling with anger, I'm struggling with jealousy, I'm struggling with Lashon Hara. So overcoming that and breaking through that confinement is Mitzrayim of Klipa. If I'm already doing other things in life that I'm doing positively, I'm keeping Shabbos, I'm keeping kosher, I'm giving tzedakah, I'm learning Torah, but I can do it in a more enhanced way, and I do that, that's going out of Mitzrayim in Kedusha. So one of the examples of this is from Tanya. This is something which you all learned, but I'll still bring it in just so you can identify with what we're talking about. It's also in the booklet that I gave out, so you can see it inside. And it's Tanya chapter 15. In Tanya chapter 15, the Alter Rebbe describes two people, and both of them are Beinani. We know that a Beinani, according to Tanya, is what most people in the world would not only call Beinani, they would call them super tzaddik. A Beinani is someone that doesn't violate anything in speech, in action, and not even in thought. There's never a time in his life that even a thought, which is not positive, will come to their mind. As soon as it could come to their mind, but as soon as they're conscious of it, they're totally in control to stop. So it doesn't violate anything in thought, nothing in speech, nothing in action. And like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, it's so strong and it's so solid that it's out of the question. It's not even a possibility to think that they'll ever do such a thing. While we're at it, I just want to explain. Some people ask, how could you say that? Everyone has free choice. How could Alter Rebbe say a Beinani is somebody that not only is observing everything now, but he'll never violate anything in Torah? That's like prophecy about the future, and everyone has free choice. What it means is as follows. It means that right now, my conviction, my commitment to keep everything in Torah is so strong that it's inconceivable the way I stand now that I'll ever violate it. To give an example, the average decent person who's not a tzaddik gomer and not even a Beinani, but regular people like us, there's certain things that we can testify about ourselves with all our humility, but we'll testify this is something which is inconceivable. I would never, God forbid, ever violate that. For example, it says in the Chassidus, do not murder. The average person could say, me, I never murdered anybody, Baruch Hashem. And I can tell you, as far as the future's concerned, it's out of the question. That's not one of the things I'll ever violate, right? That makes sense. A person who's a totally observant Jew will say, chametz on Pesach, never. Eating on Yom Kippur, never, unless God forbid, according to halacha, they have to eat because of health. So there are certain things in Yiddishkeit that we can all testify that not only I'm observing it now, I can see myself observing this for the rest of my life with absolute certainty. I mean, if anything changes, that means something unusual must have happened that forced me to be different. A Beinani, imagine, a Beinani is a person that he feels about every single detail of Yiddishkeit the way we feel about these very serious things. To him, it's totally out of the question. So if he's at such a level, the Alter Rebbe says, but there are two kinds of Beinanim. One that's going out of Mitzrayim and one that's not. Doesn't use those terms, but that's the idea. And what is the difference? An interesting difference. The difference is almost in a hairline. One of them is a person that davens and learns, studies Torah, reviews everything that he studies 100 times. That's pretty good. And why does he do that? In those days, in the times of Gemara, people studied Torah by heart. The oral Torah was literally oral. It wasn't written anywhere. So they had to study everything and retain all the information. And the way to retain information is by reviewing and reviewing and reviewing. So it was the norm for them, since they're children, whatever they studied, they reviewed 100 times. So if a person is now a mature adult and he studies Torah and reviews everything 100 times, he is considered a Beinani, absolute Beinani, but he's still, in a sense, limited. Then there's a Beinani, this is in Gemara, then there's a person that he studies 101 times. He goes one more time, more than what he's used to his whole life. That puts him into a different category. Well, the Alter Rebbe term that he uses, one is called the Eved, a servant of Hashem, as a noun, and one is called Eved, Oved, as a verb. He is currently serving Hashem. This is someone who goes beyond what they're naturally used to. Just one time more. I mean, just an interesting thing, which is one of the things somehow or other, I probably heard this when I was in the 3rd grade or something, but somehow stuck to my head. This teacher wrote the following. This is the word for forgetting in Hebrew. Shin of Ches means shacheach, to forget. What's the gematria of that? Shin is 300. Of Ches is 28. To remember is Zochar. Zion of Reish. What's the gematria of that? 227. What's the difference between the two numbers? I didn't watch. So get started. 101 times everything you learn, you won't forget it. I don't know if you get a chance to learn anything else, but so in other words, this is the Yetzias Mitzrayim. There's certain things that I'm doing, and it's positive, but this is something which is I'm accustomed to. It's normal for me. It doesn't require any extra effort. That means I'm not going out of my personal limitations. So if I just learn one more time, going out of my personal limitations, personally, that's Yetzias Mitzrayim. So the same thing could be with Tzedakah, the same thing would be with mitzvahs, with learning, with keeping Shabbos, with Yontif, with Simcha. Every aspect of Yiddishkeit, there's always room to grow. I just want to add that sometimes people ask, they use the term, have to go out of my comfort zone. So what does Hashem want? What does he care? If I'm comfortable, I don't have to make that effort. I'm learning and I'm davening, I'm doing mitzvahs, I'm doing everything good and great. Like the fellow the Alter Rebbe describes in Tanya is a person that he has no struggle with learning because he's naturally the type of person, he's like a bookworm, he loves learning. He has no struggles with women because naturally he's like a cold piece of ice, he's not attracted to anyone. He has no problem with eating food that's not kosher or anything else. He has not attracted to food or anything like that. A really dry kind of person. You don't want to meet this kind of guy. But now imagine this person is doing everything right. What's wrong? Why does Hashem say, no, I want you to go beyond your nature? Anyone have an idea what the answer might be? So the answer is, it's the same answer as why is Hashem enjoy our Avodah more than angels? The answer is because angels don't fulfill the purpose of creation. The whole purpose of creation was that we should transform this world into a dwelling place of Hashem through what? Through our Avodah. Angels, it's not their Avodah. They were created to love Hashem, to fear Hashem, to not have no Yetzer Hara. So whatever they do, they were programmed. It's not what they've created. It's not their accomplishment. So on a smaller scale, but the same idea, if I was born with a nature to learn, a nature to do good things, a nature to daven, a nature to do mitzvah, I was born with the nature just to follow orders, I have no struggles, there's nothing in me that's resisting. It's wonderful, it's beautiful, but to a certain extent, then it's not my avodah. This is how Hashem created me. How do I know that it's me? If there's a struggle, if it's something which I have to make an effort, that means this is something that I'm adding. That's my avodah personally. And that's the whole purpose of creation. So you can have two people that both are doing, one of them is doing amazing things, the other one is doing something very small, learning very little, or doing just a few mitzvahs. But whatever they're doing required effort. There was a struggle. They had to overcome something in order to do it. They had to push themselves once, twice, till they finally got it. What they did, even though it's a small little thing, this is extremely precious to Hashem because that's avodah. That's really what avodah, and that's what Yetzias Mitzrayim is. The idea of constantly growing. In fact, what about a person who had a struggle learning? He struggled and struggled and struggled. After many years, it became natural to him, and he loves learning, and there's no struggle anymore. Where does he go from there? Then he has to do more than that also. The whole point is that once I reach that point, then it's no longer my avodah, then it's already natural to me. And serving Hashem, avodah, is when, so it's not that Chaz v'Shalom Hashem wants me to feel pain. In English they say, no pain, no gain. It doesn't mean the Eibishter wants us to have pain. He wants us to do our avodah. When do I know that it's my avodah? When there's a struggle involved. If there's no struggle involved, that means it's part of my nature. If it's part of the nature, it's not my accomplishment. It's Hashem created me in such a way. So if you have a person who naturally is calm, nothing to do with Torah, nothing to do with Chassidus, nothing to do with his own avodah. He's just born with this sort of nature that he takes everything calmly. It's beautiful and it's very, very good when it comes to doing the right thing. But you can't say it's his avodah. He was born with that nature. So anything that I take and I take it a step further, that's considered my avodah. So the language of Chassidus, this is number 12, it's called Avodah B'Koyach Atzmo. This goes back to the first class we had on Monday, where we spoke about the idea, the difference between a gift that Hashem gives me from above or Avodah that I have to do my own Avodah. That it's like there's a quote in Hayom Yom. It's more pleasant when Hashem takes me by the hand and leads me, but it's more precious when I walk on my own. Of course, if you ask them, what would you like? This everything Hashem could give me, I would love that. Why I shouldn't have to struggle. But in terms of Avodah, what's more precious to Hashem is when there's Avodah. So, like everything else, it means that this that I'm talking about applies to all year long. But when does Hashem give us the power? When does Hashem empower us to be able to step out of our personal limitations? That's Pesach. That's the Yontif Mitzvah Mitzrayim. And now we understand why it means that every single day we could experience Mitzvah Mitzrayim, which means every single day there should be movement, there should be growth, should be moving forward, and that's Mitzvah Mitzrayim on a personal level. There's another part to this page, but I think we learned all about this in the Mashiach or Geula class, about the 202 sparks and how I'm not going to go into that. I'll go into another thing because, like I said, we want to cover as much as we can. And now I have to pick and choose. I'm going to move over to page 62. One of the major parts of the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim is the Aseret Makos, the 10 plagues. So the question that's asked to understand this a little bit deeper, like, why did Hashem in general need the 10 plagues? If he decided to take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim, he could have just taken them out of Mitzrayim. Why does he have to do these 10 plagues? Or if yes, why 10? And of course, the biggest question is, Hashem was very creative. He thought of very interesting ideas, frogs and lice and water turning into blood. Like why this? He could have thought of anything. He wanted to make them like miserable and annoying. There's so many other things that Hashem could have done. Why did he choose these 10 interesting things? So basically, the way Chassidus explains it, you turn the page, this page 63. This is from Pirkei Avos. And what does it say there? Hashem created the world with 10 utterances. And then it says there are 10 generations from Adam till Noach. Adam was the first, and Noach was the 10th. Then it says there were 10 generations from Noach until Avraham Avinu. So Noach was the first, and Avraham was the 10th. Turn the page. Then it says there were 10 tests. Avraham was tested 10 different times to show us how precious he was to Hashem. And then it says there were 10 miracles that Hashem performed in Mitzrayim in general, the 10 plagues and miracles that took place by the sea. And then it talks about 10 tests that the Yidden actually tested Hashem. And the next one, which is underlined, it says that there were 10 miracles that took place on a constant basis in the Beis Hamikdash. And then another one is underlined, there are 10 things that were created Erev Shabbos during what we call twilight. So without Chassidus, it's very hard to understand what this is all about and why 10. When we study Chassidus, we understand that everything in the world, of course, was created by Hashem, but Hashem created everything, and the infrastructure of everything is 10 spheres. Everything in the world has in it the 10 spheres. That's how Hashem created the world. So therefore, everything is made up of 10 parts. Of course, the human body has much more than 10 parts, but we spoke about this at different occasions, that even though there are many details, but altogether it would be classified and categorized in 10 different groups. And these 10 is Chochmah, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. And even the Torah itself. The Torah has 613 mitzvahs. And yet, originally, when Hashem gave the Torah at Har Sinai, what did He give us? 10. He gave us 10 Aseret HaDibros, 10 commandments. And it actually says that these 10 include all the 613. And Rashi brings us down in Chumash, that if you count the letters of the Aseret HaDibros, how many letters will we have? From beginning 10, not 613. 620, almost. No. Right. 613 are the mitzvahs, and the other 7 are the 7 mitzvahs, the Rabbanan. The 7 mitzvahs that the rabbis instituted, like Hanukkah, Purim, washing our hands, and so on. So basically, we see clearly how there's 613 or 620 mitzvahs, but they're all branches of 10, because everything originates in 10 spheres. So the same thing here with Mitzrayim. Going out of Mitzrayim wasn't just a technical thing, that we were slaves in this country, and Hashem took us out from this country that was evil and keeping us in Golus and made us free people. It's much deeper than that. Mitzrayim represents Klippa. This was the force of Klippa in the world. At that time, it was the strongest force of Klippa. And we were held captive by Klippa. In other words, you didn't have a neshama, you didn't have a destination, you didn't have a mission to serve Hashem with Torah and mitzvahs, to receive the Torah at Har Sinai. And here we were held captive by Klippa. And Klippa wouldn't let go of us, that we should be able to serve Hashem the way we're supposed to. Just like the body and the animal soul don't let the neshama serve Hashem the way it wants to. So this was a sort of a war between Kedusha and Klippa. And when Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, it means that Kedusha was liberated from captivity in Klippa. Klippa was holding on to it and, in a sense, controlling it and not allowing Kedusha to be what it really is. So being that going out of Mitzrayim was about destroying and weakening the power of Klippa, so Klippa is also made up of 10. Just like there's 10 spheres in Kedusha, you remember from Tanya, chapter 6, the Rebbe says, just like there are 10 attributes in the godly soul, there's also 10 attributes in the animal soul. And these 10 attributes are the source of all the negative character traits that a person has, the desires and the impulses and the passions that are in a negative way. Some of them come from Chokhmah, some come from Bina, some from Das, some come from Chesed, some come from Gvura. So too with Mitzrayim. The Klippa of Mitzrayim consists of 10 aspects, which are the 10 corresponding to the 10 spheres. So being that the time has come to weaken this Klippa, it wasn't destroyed completely, but it was weakened to the point that it had to let go, and you didn't were able to go out of Mitzrayim. So therefore, Hashem brought 10 plagues. Each plague was designed to destroy another one of these 10 aspects. And being that we don't understand, spirituality, of course, in a full way, so it's very difficult for us to see the relationship, but it means that, let's say as an example, to say that the river or water is connected to Malchus, the sphere of Malchus. And Malchus is the 10th. So the first plague was a plague on the river that it turned into blood. Of course, the details, why blood and why this and why that, needs to be explained. But this was the first plague, was sort of bringing a plague and weakening the power of Malchus in Mitzrayim. And the second plague was weakening the power of Yesod in Mitzrayim. And the third plague was to weaken the power of Hod in Mitzrayim, and so on and so forth. And then we come to the 10th plague, which was Makas Bechoros. That was to destroy and to weaken the essence of Mitzrayim after going from one level to the next, weakening it. Finally, it comes to the last thing, which is Makas Bechoros, and that's why we find an interesting thing. How long did each one of the plagues take? How much time did they take? 7 days. There was one exception, Makas Bechoros. Not only didn't take 7 days, and it took less than that, how much did it take? It was a split second. It says that Makas Bechoros took place at a moment which was midnight, which means the moment where the night ended and the day didn't start yet. And only Hashem himself could be so precise. Yeah? Yeah, back at the firstborn. In a sense, the reason why it was Bechorah, the firstborn, because just like when you talk about Klippa, we're saying that this is a plague that's out to destroy the essence of the Klippa, the beginning of the Klippa, the source of the whole Klippa. Physically, the firstborn is also the first in the whole family, and therefore the Bechoros have special rules that apply to them. That's Chachma, right? Chachma on one hand is one of the 10, but also it's considered the essence of the entire structure, Chachma. And so the Makas Bechoros was to destroy the essence of this Klippa. Okay, let me turn them on. See you later. That's what you have on the page 62. Hashem created the world with 10, there are 10 spheres, there are 10 commandments, there are 10 tests. It's all Makas Bechoros is to 10. So by the way, we have something during the Seder where we actually pronounce each one of the 10. And that's when we pour the wine. There are different customs. The Chabad custom is that we take the cup and we pour a drop of wine into the plate. And as we pronounce each one of the 10 plagues, Dam, drop of wine. Svardeya, drop of wine. And we're supposed to have in mind that just like Hashem brought the plagues in those days, that's how we're also, by pouring this wine, this is in a sense accomplishing the same thing, destroying the power of klipa, of evil in the world. And that's why it says that this wine we don't drink. In fact, we're very careful, it shouldn't even go on the table because the wine has in it a power of destruction. So in a sense, it's not just remembering the 10 plagues. When we pronounce it, it's in a sense re-experiencing, it's happening again, of course, more in a spiritual way, and more in the spiritual realm that Hashem is sending his force to weaken the power of Klippa. And that's what we're doing when we're doing the 10 markers during the Seder. So let me go from here to another thing, and that is Shabbos HaGadol, page 66. The Shabbos before Pesach has a special name. In the Shulchan Aruch, it says this Shabbos has a special name. It's called Shabbos HaGadol, the big Shabbos. And when is it? This year it happens to be Erev Pesach. That's the Shabbos before Pesach. But many other years it could be a week before Pesach, a few days before Pesach. And why is it called Shabbos HaGadol? There are a number of reasons. In fact, the most common reason that people know about is that on that Shabbos, it's been accustomed by the Rabbanim, because it's right before Pesach, they would get up in shul, and they would talk about, reminding everyone about all the laws and all the things to be careful with before Pesach. And because of that, it was a long Shabbos, so they called it Shabbos HaGadol, because they had listened for hours about all the laws that pertain to Pesach. The Alter Rebbe brings down another reason, and he says there was a big miracle that happened on that day, a huge miracle, and that's why it's called Shabbos HaGadol, because it was a Nes Gadol. And what was the Nes? The Nes was that the Yidden were commanded, and the last plague, that they should prepare a lamb, a little lamb, and that's going to be the Korban Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice. They should tie it to their beds and prepare it 4 days in advance. So naturally, the Egyptians asked them, "What are you doing with the lambs?" And by the way, you probably know that the lamb was the avodah zarah. That was the idol of Egypt. People bow down to it and they worship the lamb. Just like in India today, people worship animals, they worship cows and things like that. So the Yidden said to them, "Oh, the reason why we're having it, because in a few days we're going to be sacrificing this lamb." Why? Because the Eibush is taking us out of Mitzrayim and it's going to bring a plague on the Egyptians that the firstborn will be killed. When the firstborn heard about it, they knew this is serious business. The first plague actually happened. The second one actually happened. The third, the fourth, the fifth, the eighth, and the ninth, they all happened. So that means that the 10th one is also going to happen. Who's it going to affect? The firstborn. So they came and maybe that was the first protest in history. They came to Paro, all the firstborn, and they said, "Let the Yidden out of Mitzrayim." And Paro refused. So they waged war against Mitzrayim. There was a big war, and many of them were killed. And this is what we have in davening. If you look at page 67, these words, that doesn't mean what people think it means. Look at page 57. We say this on Shabbos. It's from Tillim. It's the chapter 136 in Tillim, where we say 26 times, Ki la'olam chasdei, Hashem's kindness is forever, is eternal. One of them is, he smote Egypt through its firstborn. Then it says, he brought Israel out of their midst, and other things that he did. So people think that Lamaka Mitzrayim Chareya means the Makkah, the plague where he killed the firstborn, and could be it means that also. But it means another thing, that Mitzrayim was beaten by their own firstborn. So the Alter Rebbe says, when did this miracle happen? It happened on the Shabbos before they went out of Mitzrayim. Because of this, every year to commemorate that miracle, we call it Shabbos HaGadol. But it's not just we call it Shabbos HaGadol. There's actually a custom that on that Shabbos, we read the Haggadah after Mincha on Shabbos. Not the whole Haggadah. We start from Avodah Mayyin. I'm sure the Haggadah teachers pointed it out. And we say it until a certain part after the Dayanos. And the reason for that is, why are we saying it on Shabbos? It's not Pesach yet. The answer is because this miracle was the beginning of the actual leaving of Mitzrayim. In other words, the other miracles were all about destroying Mitzrayim. This miracle is something huge, something very different, and it's considered this is already the beginning of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So because it's the beginning, we already start reading the Haggadah on that Shabbos. Any question? What?
It happened on Shabbos?
It happened that year. It was the 10th day of Nissan, the 10th. That year it was Shabbos. It's another question. So why don't we designate the 10th day of Nissan rather than designating the Shabbos before? We always go by the date of the month, not the day of the week. That's another question.
Okay.
I don't know. It's the one thing that I don't know.
Okay.
What I do want to talk about is, why is this considered a huge nes? Why is this more huge than any other? That's called a nes gadol, and it's a nes gadol to the point that therefore the Shabbos is called Shabbos HaGadol. So the answer is, the main nikud is that all the other plagues and all the other things that happened was Kedusha destroying Klippa. What happened here was very different and unique. And that is that Klippa itself was destroying Klippa. And not just Klippa, but if we say Bechorim Mitzrayim, we mentioned before that the Bechorim were the most prominent in the entire community, which means they represented the essence of the Klippa Mitzrayim. Firstborn, meaning the beginning, the source, the origin. They're the essence of Mitzrayim. And instead of being like all other plagues where we see Kedusha is overpowering Klippa, here we see Klippa itself is destroying Klippa. What does that show us? That ultimately everything is from Hashem. And the essence of everything is godliness. The fact that Klippa itself declared Mitzrayim is no longer, Mitzrayim has to fall apart, and Mitzrayim has to be eliminated and has to be eradicated, that itself it shows us that even in Mitzrayim, there's essence of Mitzrayim is ultimately godly, and when that is revealed, then the clip of Mitzrayim falls apart, and only the good comes out. So that's why this is considered a much greater miracle. And the Rebbe pointed it out, a reference to a lot of things that are happening today, when we see certain things. I can remember when the Iraqi war took place, and I think we learned that in the Sikha. I guess it wasn't me, it was when I was out, Rabbi Dubov was learning it, teaching it, where the Rebbe speaks about the fact that it's not only that this person from Iraq, Saddam Hussein, which was an enemy of the Jews, and he planned to, God forbid, destroy Israel and destroy the same plan as Hitler, and instead he was destroyed. But who destroyed him? Klippa destroyed him. When I mean saying the nations of the world, which are like the B'chorim of Mitzrayim, they're the ones who destroyed him. And the Rebbe said, in that way, this is very similar to what we saw when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. So whenever you hear or you see something where a president of a certain country or a prominent person makes a statement, and that statement is to support Israel, and that statement is the opposite of what the enemies of Yidden want, what's unique about it, what makes it special, is that it's not just Yidden are saying that, but it's coming from the nations of the world, which means we're beginning to see the godliness that's really inside the nations of the world also. Which means that really the essence of everything in the world is godly, but it has to come out and be revealed. We all know the story with Avraham Avinu, that he had a tent in the desert, and whenever came by, he gave them food, and he gave them whatever they needed for their journey. And then he said to them, okay, now that I gave you this food, bless Hashem. If they said yes, it was all nice and fine. What happened if they said no? What?
They have to pay for it.
Not only pay, but he gave them a bill that they had to pay like they were in a 5-star hotel. And they were saying, what? Pay so much money for meat, so much money for bread, so much money for drink. So he says, if you can get this food in the desert someplace else, hey, you want to get it for me in the desert, you have to pay this big price. When they saw that, they said, okay, I'll bless Hashem. And they said, Baruch Atah Hashem, whatever they said, to bless Hashem. So the Rebbe asked the obvious question, what was the point in that? They didn't really mean it. They didn't really intend. They only did it because he was charging them this enormous amount of money. And the Rebbe's answer is that in essence, everyone in the world, even the Arvim, the non-Jews at that time, the essence is also godly. And therefore, when you press and press and press, and ultimately the person comes out and says, okay, I'll bless Hashem, in a sense, that's his true essence is coming out in the open. So this is what we'll see when Mashiach comes, and this is what we're beginning to see now, what we saw then in Mitzrayim. Okay, we have a few more minutes, so let's go into another subject, the 4 cups of wine. And we know that a lot of things on the night of Pesach is with the number 4. And the reason is because when Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, there were 4 terms that are used in reference to redemption. So look at page 70, or if you don't have the booklet, it's Chumash Shmos, Parshas Va'era. It's Parsha 6, but it's Pasuk 6. No, I'm doing something wrong. Is it? Yeah. It's Parsha 6, Pasuk 6. What is it saying? I am Hashem that I took you out of Mitzrayim. So in Hebrew it says V'hitzesi, I underlined it. Then it says V'hitzalti, then it says V'galti, then it says V'lakachti. V'hitzesi means I will bring you out. V'hitzalti means I will save you, I will redeem you, and I will take you. So basically, these are 4 different words that are used to describe going out of Mitzrayim. And because there are 4 different terms that are used, therefore we drink 4 cups of wine. And therefore we do other things that are connected to the number 4. But the question is, so what, just because there's 4 different terms everything has to be connected to the number 4. So the answer is, why is it 4 terms in the first place? So obviously, the 4 terms are not just 4 different words, just to make it sound, a little bit more interesting, but it represents one thing. It says it represents the 4 golusim that we have to go through in the future. On the page 69, I wrote it down. One is to go out of after going out of Mitzrayim, we had to be taken out of Babylon. We were taken out of the Persian Golus, which is Purim. We were taken out of the Greek Golus, which is Hanukkah. And then in the future, we'll be taken out of the Golus Edom, which is Rome, and that'll be when we go out of this Golus. So it represents 4 Golusim. But being that this is also used in reference to Mitzrayim, it must be that in Egypt itself, and going out of Egypt, there were 4 parts to the process. So just like we said before, that there was destroying Mitzrayim required 10 plagues because it's made up of 10 aspects. What is the 4? We find that we ask 4 questions. The Haggadah says that the whole Haggadah is addressing 4 kinds of children: Russia, the Chacham, and the Tam, Shen. So the general answer is that, again, everything in the world comes from Hashem's name, which is made up of 4 letters, Yud Kei Vav Kei. And that's why we have 4 worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Tzira, Siyah. And that's why everything in the world is made up of 4 elements: fire, air, earth, and water. So when we're saying that we're going out of Mitzrayim, once we understand that everything in the world is made up of these, again, 4 different aspects. So the going out of Mitzrayim is also 4 different stages of going out. One is represented by V'hitzesi, one is V'hitzalti, one is V'ga'alti, and one is V'lakachti. 4 stages in leaving Mitzrayim and becoming more free. And it's just interesting that there's another word in the Chumash, which is the 5th word, and that is Vehevesi. Why isn't that counted? It also underlined it here. I will bring you to the land which I promised to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Why doesn't it say that? And the answer is Vehevesi is different. Those 4 talk about going out of Mitzrayim, about the Exodus. Vehevesi is about going into Eretz Yisrael. So it's interesting that by the Haggadah, there's also 4 cups of wine, but there's a 5th. What's the 5th cup? The cup of Eliyahu Hanavi. At the end of the Seder, we pour a 5th cup. And by the way, there are also customs that they actually poured a 5th cup, but they didn't drink it. It's another story. But even our custom that we only drink 4 cups, but there's a 5th cup that we don't drink, and that's the cup Koshel Eliyahu. And that corresponds to the 5th term. And it's interesting to note that there are 4 questions, but there's also a 5th question. What's the 5th question? In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, they used to ask the 5th question. Why every night of the year we can eat meat whichever way we want, and we can eat it cooked, baked, roasted, and tonight we can't eat it roasted. I mean, we only eat it roasted. That's the way you're supposed to eat the Korban Pesach, roasted. This question we don't ask today because it's not relevant today. But then there was a 5th question. So it's interesting, there's 4, but there's also a 5th. And by the way, there's 4 sons, but there's also a 5th. Who's the 5th? What? The one that doesn't come to the Seder. So it's interesting, there's 4, and then there's 5, and so on. So it's a very deep subject, but I'm going to just go into it briefly. And that is, we find that it says in the Haggadah that, you probably came to this part already, that every one of the plagues consisted of 4 plagues. It says in the Chumash 10, because in general it was 1 plague, but that 1 plague had 4 different things happening, so in a sense it was like 4 plagues. So altogether, in Egypt, they didn't have 10 plagues alone, it was really 40 plagues. But of course, there's another opinion that says every plague had 5 plagues in it. And it goes on to the 2 different opinions. So one of the reasons why 4 it fits in, it's consistent with everything else about Pesach that's connected to number 4, but it would mean similar to what we said about the Makos, being that the Klippa has in it air, earth, fire, and water. So therefore, the purpose of the plague was to destroy it. It had to destroy every one of those 4 aspects. So therefore, every plague consisted of 4. What's number 5? Number 5 is these 4 elements are the elements that constitute whatever object it is. But then there's a 5th, and the 5th is the essence, which means not the details of it, but the essence of it, the core of it. So one opinion says all the Hashem did was destroy the fire, air, and earth and water that's in it. And the other opinion is that Hashem destroyed the essence of the Klippa. And therefore there's 5. Another one says there's 4. And this is also related to the difference of opinion. How do you get rid of chametz? One opinion says you can do whatever you want. Throw it in the water, take it and throw it in the wind, and the wind will spread it out. Rub it together to pieces, then grind it, make it into. Another opinion says, which is the halacha, the only way to get rid of chametz is by burning it. So the difference is when you throw it in the water or you throw it in the wind and you let it be scattered, you're basically not destroying the essence, you're just making things fall apart. There's something here that's all together, and I'm making it fall apart. When you burn it, you're destroying the essence. So the Rebbe shows that these 2 opinions are consistent with each other. That the opinion that there are 5 plagues means that the purpose of the plague was not just the 4 elements, but to destroy the essence. And that's why when we get rid of chametz, we also have to burn it. By doing that, we destroy the essence. Okay, I think based on what the clock is telling me, we gotta stop. So tomorrow, Mitzvah Show, we'll try to see and squeeze in whatever's left here as much as possible. You're very welcome. It reminds me of the Rebbe once gave a sikha, and he spoke about marriage, and he spoke about the reason why you take a ring, why do you have to a ring, and why does it have to be of gold, and whether it's silver gold or this kind of gold. And after you finish the whole thing, the Rebbe said, but when you go to the chassan, you got to make sure to actually bring the physical ring. In other words, you're talking about all the spiritual things about it, but not to forget, the main thing is, action. And same thing is here. We have all these things that we're learning about. That means that when we're doing the Seder and we're focusing on these things that have more meaning, but the main thing that needs to be done is the action, which is all the minhagim, all the customs that contain all this thing. Okay, to be continued. It's not for the day. Reminding everybody, if you still have to sign up, sell the chametz, we have the paper, we have the pen. If you know any of you